Hi there, welcome to Bible/Chat. We're chatting about the Bible. Jason, how are you?
Good, how are you?
So in this one, we're going to do a little bit more than chat about the Bible. We're going to take a dive into the deeper end of the pool a little bit, right?
A little bit.
This weekend, Jason taught on Christology at our church, and he talked about, the pre-incarnate Christ.
Yeah.
And
yes.
This very interesting topic there on subordination and Christ's life. Matthew 26:39. We know this well. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yep.
He says, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will."
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yep.
What's interesting there is there seems to be a division in the will of God.
Yeah.
Like two wills of God that are
Yeah.
opposed to one another, and Christ is subordinating his will to the Father's will.
Yep.
Can you fill out that theology for us a little bit? Is that accurate? Has
It
it
is
always
accurate.
been that way?
Right.
What took place there?
Right. The always been that way is the debate.
Okay.
So it's true that once everyone agrees that Jesus Christ, as the God-man, when he takes on human nature, has to have a human will.
Okay.
And so God is divine nature, has a divine will.
Okay.
Human nature has a human will.
Okay.
So every nature has one will.
Gotcha.
And so Jesus, he's the most unique one, of course, because he's God-man.
Right.
So he has a divine will, obviously, and he was there before the creation of the world.
Yep.
He's eternally existed, God the Father, Son, and Spirit, right? 3 in 1, forever and ever before time.
Right.
But all of a sudden, of course, when the time is ripe, he becomes a man in addition to having a divine nature and divine will and divine attributes.
Gotcha.
He has human attributes all of a sudden now. And so all throughout his life, he exhibits that humanity in lots of ways. One of the main ways he does is by saying, "Father, not my will," but living his life that way, as you just read, "Not my will be done, but yours."
Yeah.
And says things like in John where it's, I came to do my Father's will, it's my food.
Yeah, it's my food to do the will of my Father.
Like the thing that he lives off of is doing God's will. Doing it. And in that way, he's a good example for us. And of course, in that way, he also, more importantly, represents us as our, second Adam, as like the perfect man, so that he can then, fulfill all righteousness and die for us. Yeah.
In his humanity.
In his humanity, because divine nature can't die.
Right.
God cannot die. So all of that's very complex, obviously.
Right.
But
helpful.
it's true, right?
Yeah.
And it is helpful, I think, to know the depths of Christ as much as we can.
Yeah.
But so there are two wills there, okay? In that there is a divine will, which is so weird because, of course, Christ is a part of that. Because he never shed his divinity, his deity.
Yeah.
He just added a humanity, And so it's we're gonna whatever we say, someone could say, but what about? But that's the point. There's always a what about, because he's the God-man. Okay, so just put all that aside. Divine will, yes, or we could say the Father's will, if you want to put it that way.
Which was the Son's will.
It was the Son's
prior
will
to the incarnation,
eternally so,
and even during the incarnation, that his divine nature had carried the same will as the Father.
Exactly. There was never a split between them in some kind of negative way.
Right.
But yet, now that he has a human nature, he has a human will, which, of course, always perfectly submitted or subordinated itself to the divine will.
Gotcha.
The question then becomes, has it eternally been that way?
Gotcha.
For all eternity, even before he put on a human nature, was Jesus eternally subordinate to the Father? Now, there's been increasing debate about this in some Christian circles or parts of the blogosphere.
Ooh.
So it gets a little testy out there about this, but... And I think to boil it down, the issue here is one nature, one will. Prior to the incarnation, did Jesus have a human nature? We would say, of course not.
Right.
He only had a divine nature. He was God the Son, eternally, no human nature. And there was one counsel of the divine will. Right?
Sure.
Ordaining things, decreeing things. No point in time. From all eternity, this has been the way.
Yeah.
And from all eternity, the Son has always existed in that relationship to the Father, and the Spirit to both the Son and the Father.
Right.
Not that one was lesser or lower than the other, and those weren't just, those were their names too, but it distinguished one from the other and how they would relate. And also, like, it pointed forward to, I think, and I think I didn't say this enough in the class, but it pointed forward, and you really see that play out more so in the works of redemption.
Right.
Where you're like, oh, the Father sends the Son.
Right.
And the Son submits to the Father, obeys unto death on a cross. Yeah. And the Spirit is sent by the Father, because Jesus says that, right? In the Upper Room Discourse. Yeah. Through the Son.
Yep.
proceeds both from one through the other out into the world.
Yeah.
And the Spirit likes to do one thing, constantly sort of like submitting himself and pointing to Jesus and maximizing his glory.
Yeah, maximizing the glory of Christ.
Yeah. And so what theologians would say is eternally there wasn't subordination because there's only one will, one nature. Everything changes when the plan of redemption, sort of explodes on the scene with Jesus's incarnation. When he's conceived by the Spirit in Mary's womb. So things change there. Now that there's the God-man, the second member of the Trinity is that, and he's going to be that forever. He does submit his will to the Father's will, even though it's not in contrast to the Father's will at all. Right. He always willingly, voluntarily, joyfully submits to the Father's will, and thus becomes for us our perfect substitute, our perfect example. It's like, and the one that we're growing into. So we're supposed to be the ones who always submit to God's will,
reflect the same heart of Christ.
Exactly, and we are subordinate, of course. We always have been. But Christ, though he has eternally been the Son, was not subordinate in his will prior to his incarnation.
Gotcha.
Yeah. They shared one will.
Gotcha.
But then when he came on the scene in space and time, then things changed. Yeah, in the economy of redemption.
Yeah. That's good. That's very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so one divine will, always and eternal true.
Yeah.
Incarnation comes. Now we have a human will coupled with the divine will in the hypostatic union.
Yeah.
That human will submits to the divine will.
Yeah.
And then Christ dies. He's raised
exalted.
again, exalted, human will intact at that point because he's eternally God the Son.
And God the man. The Son of Man too.
Yeah.
So it's weird, right? And the last act of submission that he does, as far as we know, is that he will then, once judging all his enemies and everything, final judgment is complete, he will hand the kingdom over to his Father, who actually handed it to him. So it's kind of like
a little bit. It's the Trinity, right? At the end of the day, it's the Gordian knot. You can't get it.
You can't explain it in purely rational, easy to understand terms.
Yeah.
But that is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And in showing submission to the Son, it doesn't make him less valuable.
It's not lesser in any way.
No, not at all. In fact, right, that's the whole point of Philippians 2. Yeah. His submission actually makes him more exalted, or results in greater exaltation.
Absolutely.
So anyway, that's the mystery
super helpful.
of all of that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's a really, really deep topic, but super helpful. So thanks so much. Well, it brings honor and glory to Christ, right?
Ultimately, it's worship.
The profundity of his character and his nature and his incarnation.
Yeah. That's what it should lead to. Yeah.
Yeah, we just praise Jesus.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Hope that's helpful for you. Thanks so much.